the Ethiopian Empire, an empire without a core. Welcome to The Question Empires Never Like. Empires do not like questions. They prefer myths, monuments, flags, and anniversaries. But history begins where myths are questioned. Across human history, empires have risen and fallen with astonishing regularity. Yet they share a quiet structural logic, a logic so common that we rarely notice it. Empires are usually built by a people, around that people, and in the name of that people's destiny. The Roman Empire was Roman before it was imperial. The British Empire was English before it was global. Even multi-ethnic empires had a recognizable center, a demographic, cultural, and territorial anchor. But the Ethiopian Empire breaks this pattern. It is an empire that expanded massively, ruled centrally, and endured symbolically, yet without ever resolving a basic imperial question. Who is the empire for? In this video, we explore why the Ethiopian Empire is structurally different, why this difference matters, and why it continues to shape violence, resistance, and political crisis today. 1. The normal geometry of empire. Let us begin with theory, not ideology, but structure. Empires usually have 5 foundational pillars: a demographic core that imagines itself as the state, a core territory from which power radiates, a capital city embedded in that territory, a language of rule shared by the core, a legitimating myth that binds center and periphery. This structure creates stability, not justice, but coherence. Rome expanded outward from Latium. Paris sat at the heart of France. London anchored Britain's imperial imagination. Even when empires ruled brutally, the ruling population could say, "This empire is an extension of us." Now hold that image, because Ethiopia does something radically different to an empire built by conquest, not consensus. The modern Ethiopian state took its present territorial shape primarily in the late 19th century. This was not gradual integration. It was a rapid military expansion. Large regions, home to ancient societies, were incorporated through force. Oromia, Sidama, Walaita, Kaffa, Somali territories, Gambela, Benishangul. These were not marginal lands. They were populated, governed, productive, and culturally rich. Yet incorporation did not produce partnership. Instead, it produced a hierarchical imperial order, where conquered peoples became subjects rather than co-founders. Here lies the first anomaly. The empire builder did not represent a demographic majority. The largest population, Oromo, became governed rather than governing. Empires often rule many peoples, but they are usually anchored in a dominant one. Ethiopia institutionalized minority dominance. That distinction is everything, because legitimacy flows downward from numbers, memory, and belonging. When the majority experiences the state as something imposed, not shared, the empire becomes structurally unstable, no matter how long it lasts. 3. Addis Ababa, a capital without a core. Now we arrive at the heart of the paradox. Addis Ababa. Capitals are not just administrative centers. They are symbolic organisms. They tell a story about who owns the state. Rome did not conquer Latium and then build Rome there. London was not planted in Ireland. Paris was not built in Algeria. But Addis Ababa was founded not on neutral ground, nor in a core Abyssinia, but on Finfini, a land that was entirely inhabited by Oromo communities prior to imperial expansion. That is, before 1889, the establishment of the city followed the conquest of the entire Oromo land, Oromia, and other peoples in the south, southeast, east, and west, and was accompanied by the violent displacement and removal of Oromo subclans who had lived on and governed the land for generations. In this sense, Addis Ababa emerged through forced land appropriation and demographic transformation, turning an indigenous Oromo homeland into the administrative and military center of the expanding empire. It was not inherited. It was imposed. The city emerged as a military administrative hub sustained by land expropriation, forced displacement, imperial authority. This produces a strange inversion. Instead of the empire expanding outward from its core, the capital was planted inward into colonized land. Addis Ababa was never simply a city. It was a political fortress. This explains why the city has always been surrounded by anxiety. Anxiety about language, anxiety about demography, anxiety about control. A capital without a demographic home must constantly defend itself by displacing the surrounding. That defense takes cultural, political, and military forms. This is not accidental. It is structural. Free language and the architecture of power. Language tells you who the state belongs to. In most empires, the imperial language is simply the core language expanded outward. In Ethiopia, Amharic became the sole language of administration, courts, education, the military, upward mobility. But it did so without a demographic majority. Even after the introduction of federalism, Amharic remained the exclusive federal working language. This transforms language into something darker than communication. It becomes a gatekeeping mechanism. If you speak it, you enter power. If you do not, you orbit power. Language thus becomes a social elevator for some, a ceiling for others. This is why linguistic debates in Ethiopia are never technical. They are existential. They are about who counts as the state. Addis Empire without an integrating story. Empires survived not only through force, but through belief. Rome offered citizenship. The Ottomans offered religious autonomy. The British Empire offered legal subjecthood. Ethiopia struggled to offer an integrating myth. Instead, imperial ideology emphasized civilizing missions, religious hierarchy, historical entitlement, cultural superiority. For the incorporated peoples, empire meant land alienation, cultural suppression, political exclusion. This produced a state that demanded loyalty without offering belonging. The result was not occasional rebellion, but permanent resistance. When resistance lasts for generations, it is no longer rebellion. It is counter-history. 6. The federal promise and the imperial remainder. In 1995, Ethiopia adopted a constitution that attempted something radical. It acknowledged nations and nationalities, equality of peoples, self-determination. This was a post-imperial text. But the imperial structure remained. Power stayed centralized. The capital remained untouched. The security state stayed intact. The political economy stayed hierarchical. This created a dangerous hybrid. A post-imperial constitution governing an imperial state. Such hybrids are unstable. They promise autonomy but deliver control. They recognize identity but deny power. This contradiction fuels today's conflicts. 7. What kind of empire was Ethiopia? Comparatively, Ethiopia resembles a rare historical form, an inward colonial empire. Not overseas, not distant, but intimate. An empire that colonized neighbors. An empire that planted its capital among them. An empire that never underwent internal decolonization. This is why debates over Addis Ababa, language, federalism, self-rule, never disappear. They are not policy issues. They are unfinished historical questions. Finally, conclusion. History does not forget structure. Empires fall when their structures collapse, but they suffer when their contradictions remain unresolved. Ethiopia's crisis is not about diversity. It is about hierarchy. It is not about identity. It is about ownership of the state. Until the empire confronts its own architecture, honestly and structurally, the future will remain contested. History is patient, but it is relentless. And unfinished empires always return, not as memories, but as conflicts. And this is why, beginning in 2019, Oromia and other parts of the Ethiopian state have entered a period marked by a profound paradox. A federal text promising self-rule, yet an imperial reality re-emerging thereby, enforcing central control.